Good afternoon, this is Bottleskins.com. I'm Steve the Sleeve, and this afternoon we'll be working on tip number 1 for designers. Today we're going to be creating a basic shrink sleeve die line in Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Firstly, take your Illustrator, open it up, and create a brand new artboard, as you've got here, and you'll see that over here in the Layers panel. Now you probably want to name that, so we probably want to give that a name, so double tap the layer, bring up the Layers option, and I'm just going to call that die line. As you can see, that's now renamed the layer die line. We're pretty much ready to go. Now the first things that we need when we're creating a die line is we need some measurements. And secondary to those measurements, it's always nice to have a little bit of an understanding about what we're creating a shrink sleeve for. So here I have a 3D mock-up and a 2D mock-up of the actual bottle itself, so we can actually see what we're working with and have a look at what constraints that we have. You can see this bottle isn't straight up and down. It does have some curves and a little bit of shape to it. At the moment, we're just going to work with the die line. So the first things that we have here are the cut length, which is 238 millimeters. Now that's our measurement from the label bottom to the top of the label. It doesn't necessarily mean the measurement from the bottom to the top of the bottle. It is just the height of the label that is going to be applied to the bottle, the container, the vial, whatever it might be. Secondly, we have the lay flat, which is 153 millimeters. Now that is actually the measurement of the width of the label once the seam has been welded and the label has been folded. So it's basically half of the label. Beyond that, we have the seam measurement, 6 millimeters for this particular exercise. Some places have a 7 millimeter seam, some places have an 8 millimeter seam, some places have a 9 millimeter seam. It really is just dependent on the manufacturer. Everyone has different specifications, so it's always crucial to ask what the seam dimensions are for each sleeve die line before you can create it. Now we're going to start by creating our die line. Now firstly we want to jump into our color swatch here. We just want to choose a color that's nice and contrasting, nothing too dark. It doesn't need to be too dark, just enough so we can see it on the white artboard here. So I'm just going to go ahead and select a grey. That's pretty good, we should be able to see that nice and clear. Now secondly we want to choose the rectangle tool over here in the Illustrator tool panel there. And we're just going to click in the middle of our white space here, and we're just going to double tap, which is going to bring up our rectangle options box, and where we can set the dimensions of the rectangle. And we probably want to start with the height because that's an approximate number. So we have a cut length of 238. We know it's not going to go anywhere inside or outside of that number. So let's just check that at 238 millimeters. Now we come to the tricky part. The width and working out what our actual total width is for the label. Now the way we do that is we take the lay flat and we times that by 2 to create the full label width. So 153 times 2 in my head very quickly is 306. Now one thing we also need to consider here is the seam, and this is where the seam measurements become very important. We've got a seam here of 6 millimeters, so we also need to apply that in order to create this basic die line. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to the top, 312, click OK, great. Illustrator has now produced us with this beautiful rectangle that we have, which is going to be the base of our basic shrink sleeve die line. And as you can see, if we move this over to the side of the bottles, it gives you a bit of an idea about where the die line here and what the label dimensions are against the container or the bottle that you're going to be working with. You can see how far up, taking into account that this will actually shrink down in widthways. So it may not necessarily finish over the cap here, and it's likely that with the dimensions that you've got, they have been pre-tested, and we'll find that it will probably end up shrinking just below the base of the neck, which is where most shrink sleeves will shrink to. So on to the next phase. Now that we've got our total element artboard here, or workspace, we can look at creating the actual clear space of the label to work out where our art is going to be once we start designing. So we're just going to copy and paste in front For those that want to know, that's Command C to copy, Command F to paste in front. And we should have another element on top here. And I'm just going to make sure by clicking Control, clicking on my mouse and bringing that element to the front to ensure that that element is definitely on the front. I will also change that color. Doesn't really matter what color it is, but just something that is not the same as what you've used. So now you can see I've got two colors there, one on top of the other. So I'll be able to see once I start making adjustments. Okay, now to start creating the clear space, we want to bring our transform panel over. We can see here is our transformation box. You can see the leading corners, leading edges, and this little widget here. We want to adjust the width and the height of the object that we have selected, which is the one we've changed the color of. So really we want to start with the seam first. And we probably need to understand the difference between this seam because we're going to have 6 millimeters, but it will be broken down, and what we require is 5 millimeters on the right hand side to be taken away. So we're going to select the left because we want to pull this point to the left by 6 mm. And the way you do that is by selecting the node, jumping into your width box, and then selecting -5. You can see that this point is now moved backwards 5 millimeters to the left where we selected the left node. Is perfect, and we need to add minus 1 millimeter off the left hand side, so we'll select the right because we want it to pull to the right, and we'll -1. Again, making sure that you haven't switched your linking there so that you're not constraining properties, because that will really muck things up for you. Right, so that's basically our clear seam left and right sorted out, and now with the cut length of 238 we need to minus our clear top and bottom of our image area. So what we can do is we want to go to click on our center node because we're pulling top and bottom. In most cases it's going to be 2 millimeters of clear top and bottom in most cases, and definitely for this exercise it's going to be 2 millimeters. So we're just going to go in height, and we're going to tap through here, and we're going to -4 because we need 2 at the bottom and 2 at the top, total of 4. And you can see now that we can actually see with the grey in the background there, exactly where our clear space is going to be. Now the easiest and quickest way to do this is to select the top layer and just make it white. Group these two objects together, and there we have it. The white space in the center there is going to be where we're going to apply our artwork and our design, and the grey on the external area here is actually going to be clear. We can now identify a proper working space for our shrink sleeve, and that is a basic die line made in Adobe Illustrator. I'm Steve the Sleeve, and thanks very much for listening to me. Remember, check us out at bottleskins.com online.